So for a while now, I wanted to do a couple videos on how to plan out your food plots. And there's really two subjects. The first is what makes a food plot attractive to deer. And then the second is what do you plant in them? And they're two different subjects. And I think a lot of hunters are confused and thinking it's the same thing, and it's not. So this first video is what makes a food plot attractive to deer. And it's really three things, and I'll cover that. And the reason why I wanted to make it two videos is I just don't want it to get really long. And as usual, I have some notes here that I want to go through to make sure I don't miss anything. But the first thing that we as hunters have to understand when it comes to food plot attractiveness is that wild deer are selective in where they bed, where they travel, and where and what they eat. In other words, they get to choose. They aren't farm raised. You're not feeding them supplemental food or hay or whatever like you would cows or something like that. The deer get to choose each and every single day where they're going to eat and what they're going to eat. And the first thing they have to consider, so there's three things that they really have to consider on a daily basis on where they're going to eat and what they're going to eat. And the first is what is available. What's available to them? So this is kind of a tricky deal because some hunters will plant, and I'm just going to use brassicas for an example. Some hunters will plant brassicas and they'll say they have, tremendous success or good luck or it's a very attractive food source. 5 miles away, the same brassica blend, the same amendments to the soil, fertilizer, timing, rainfall, etc. In other words, the same food plot, 5 miles away, also brassicas, and the deer won't touch it. And so the thought process is, well, it was the seed. It's a different blend, or I didn't fertilize enough, or the pH was wrong. And a lot of times that's just not the case. It's what's available to the deer in that area is going to determine what they're going to select, what they're going to choose. Another way of looking at this is, without focusing just on a certain variety, if you have, let's say, a lush alfalfa field available in your area, that as a green source of food will outcompete just about every other food plot variety or green variety of forage for deer that I've seen. So an alfalfa field is going to outcompete clover, cereal grains, brassicas, etc. because that's what's available. You remove that alfalfa field and all of a sudden maybe clover and cereal grains or brassicas become more attractive. The deer will focus in on those more. So what's available will determine what's attractive to deer. How close in proximity to deer's preferred bedding areas is also a determining factor. If a deer has to travel a half a mile or 3/4 of a mile or a mile to get to that alfalfa field, they might do that. But if there's something that's pretty close in nutritional value, let's say clover or cereal grains, maybe it's a biennial clover, like I like crimson clover. If that's only 200 yards away as opposed to that alfalfa field is a mile away, that's going to be a determining factor. They're not going to want to put themselves at risk traveling a mile and burning a lot of energy and so forth to get to that preferred food source that's a mile away. So proximity to their preferred bedding is a choice in what they select for that daily feeding. And then a third consideration for deer is what kind of risk am I taking getting to that food source, which is, not only how far away it is or how close it is, but what kind of predators are between my bedding area and that food source, and what kind of risk am I taking at that food source. And when I talk about that, I'm talking primarily hunters. So if you have a very attractive food source, or what should be a very attractive food source, and it gets overhunted or it gets hunted a lot, that attractive field, again, let's just use alfalfa for example, or a lush clover field, that might not be a preferred food source anymore. It might not be attractive to the local whitetail herd because they have to select a food source that has a high risk of them being killed, of predators in humans hunting them. So three things that they're going to look at every single day when they make that choice. What's available to them? What do I want to eat today? Is it legumes? Is it alfalfa? Is it clover? Is it green soybeans? Do I want grains? Maybe later in the season it's soybean grain, the soybean itself. Maybe it's corn. Later in the season, these become more attractive than, let's say, a clover plot. So it's what's available. What am I going to select? What do they want for that day? And then the second consideration is, how far do I have to go to get that? How much energy am I going to burn to get that? During the late season, sometimes on standing grains, I'll see deer travel 3/4 or a mile if it gets really cold and we get some snow to standing corn, for example. If it's warm, they're not going to bother traveling a mile. If it's 30 degrees or 40 degrees in early December, for example, and there's no snow on the ground, they'll select a subpar, if you want to call it that, food source, because there's a lot less risk. So those are really the three things. It's keeping it simple. Why is a food plot attractive, or what makes a food plot attractive? What's available, proximity to their daytime bedding, and how much risk are they taking at that food plot with hunters. And that's important for us to understand, because if we want to attract deer to a certain area, to a food source, we have to provide them with what they want. So, that's greens. Early in the season, that's always greens. September, October, they prefer greens. Cut corn becomes very attractive when the combines roll through, let's say in early October, late October. Cut corn is very attractive to deer. But your grains like soybeans and really standing corn aren't really that attractive until some of your greens has taken some heavy frost and they go dormant. So if you want to provide hunting season long food, supplemental food with food plots, it's greens and grains. I prefer to target my peak attractiveness with my food plots during the gun season for any given area. I don't care what state you're in, because I want to make sure that I have the bucks that I'm passing up in and around my property as much as I can. I want them to select my property as much as I can. So I want to make sure and select food plots, what I plant, so that they're attractive during that gun season in my area. So I'm always including grains. The second part of that is, how close is that food source to their bedding area? And most of us don't have, enormous properties of, 1,000+ acres. So that's usually not an issue. Deer will gladly travel 300-400 yards, 500 yards to a food source if it's a preferred food source. And lastly, if there's little risk. It's for this reason that my destination type food plots, whether they're green or grains or all three, or I should say or both. And when I say all three, it's because a lot of times my grains are soybeans and corn. But I'll do soybeans and corn and a green at my destination plot, and I won't hunt that. And the reason why I won't hunt that destination food plot is because I want to make sure that there's zero risk for deer coming to that destination food plot, so they select that destination food plot. If I start hunting that and I'm bumping deer while I'm on stand, or I'm getting down and I'm bumping deer, maybe I'm walking past that stand in the evening when I'm leaving other spots on the farm, that destination food plot that I want to attract and hold deer on my property all of a sudden isn't that attractive anymore. The deer aren't going to select it because they see that as a high risk area. So I don't think that deer think like we do. I don't think deer sit in their beds during the day and actually think about this stuff. Like, how far do I have to walk to my food source tonight? What do I want to eat, for dinner tonight? Like we do. Do I want chicken? Do I want steak? Do I want a salad? They don't think that way. And they're not consciously thinking, oh, there's hunters there. I think instead they're reacting to stimulus. Their bodies tell them what they need for their nutrition, tell them how far they should walk based on, conserving energy, exposing themselves to predators. And then I like to think of this risk factor when it comes to avoiding hunters is more of a learned type event in their life. So it's kind of like I used to raise, I shouldn't say raise, but I used to hunt with beagles for rabbits. And the way I would train my beagles is just through positive reinforcement. So if I wanted a dog to mine and come back to me when I would call its name when they were younger, I would give them a positive reinforcement through like some kind of dog snack. A negative reinforcement would be scolding the animal. And they just learn that through positive enforcement and then negative enforcement. And deer are very similar to that, I believe. So I don't think that they consciously think like we do. They're not sitting around thinking about this stuff, but if they go to a food plot, they don't know that that's a food plot until they get human interaction, once or twice or repeatedly, and then they just avoid that negative stimulus. They don't want that negative stimulus. It causes stress, and it's a deciding factor, even though it's not conscious per se. So they'll avoid that area, even if it's during daylight, and they'll get there after daylight. So what makes a food plot attractive? It really is three things. So don't necessarily get hung up on what to plant, although that's important. It also is proximity to their daytime bedding, and it's hunter pressure on that food source. I've seen many times where hunters will hunt a destination food plot or hunt a kill plot or hunt a transition plot with the wrong wind, or they're busting deer and they'll burn that spot out, and then they're looking for the next best, latest and greatest food plot blend that's marketed to them as a way to attract those deer back to that food source for next year. And really that's not the issue. The issue of why a deer is not attracted to a food source is because there's something better. There's something that they prefer within their home range, close proximity to their bedding area. So if you're planting, let's go back to that scenario where you're planting brassicas, and 200 yards, over to the south, let's say, the neighbors have a really lush 10-acre alfalfa field. It's not even a food plot. It's an alfalfa hay field. They're going to select that alfalfa field, especially if it's not hunted, over just about anything green that you can plant. So it's not that you necessarily did anything wrong. It's not that you used the wrong seed or the wrong fertilizer, etc. It's just that they selected something else. So be mindful of that when you're selecting your food plot, whether it's green or grains in the fall, to find out what's all in the area. And then that's what you're really competing against throughout the season, is you're competing against what else is available in that area to be attractive to deer. So just remember, when you're thinking about food plot attractiveness, and I want to attract deer to this food source, there's three things to consider. One is what you're going to provide them, what food you're going to provide them, and what that's competing against, how close it is to their bedding area, and really, I think the most important thing is what kind of hunting pressure is on that food source. And those three things are going to determine what makes that food plot attractive to deer. Those three things. Keep that in mind this spring, and then again this fall when you're deciding what you're going to plant, where you're going to plant it, and how it's hunted or how it's not hunted, to just hold those deer and keep that as a place mark for deer in your area. So normally this time of year, this is my busy time. This is production planting, food plot planting, but we'll see if I can't get this other video out about what I plant and why I plant it. Instead of just, the keys to attracting or making a food plot attractive, I'll get into what I plant and why I plant it to make sure I have the most attractive food sources for deer on my farms. That'll be in the next video.